This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I am very honored to be back with Andrew R. Thomas. He is an author and a business professor at University of Akron. This is the third time he has been on our show. I think that is a record, but
Oh,
he he's totally worth it when we want to talk about geopolitics or, you know, current events, stuff, energy related stuff, um, crisis going on in the world. He's our guy. And I am also really, really happy to be with Lloyd, my dad. Uh, One of our goals is to do more podcasts together this year, and we've gotten a good start on this. So, let's go here. Um,
My
so,
pleasure too, to be
yeah,
on with Andrew and you.
thank you. So, first, I just want to give people a little context of who you are. Why are you on the show? You're like, I don't know. Um, yeah, give us the, 5-minute bio, to give us a little context, and then we'll start talking. We want to talk energy today, tariffs, Trump, Panama, which all basically is connected. So it'll be fun.
yeah. Well, hey guys, good to see you again. Lloyd, Noah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Glad to see you guys are doing so well. Uh, I'm a recovering manufacturer, entrepreneur, business owner. I did that for about 10 years. We had a joint venture in China in the early 90s and built motorcycles with a joint venture partner there, the Communist Party, if you want to call it such, and sold those motorcycles in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East. Had distribution in over 100 countries. I think we sold that business in early 2000s. My wife and I decided we wanted to become educators. Her first, she went back to become a school teacher, got her master's. I was a stay-at-home dad while she was doing that. I began to write some books on how to do international business, kind of my experiences, and then had the opportunity, to apply for a job at my alma mater, the University of Akron, teaching international business classes, and did that. And I really liked it. Went on and got a PhD and continued to write books and other articles and other opinion pieces, if you will. Most recently, at my two of my most recent books were on global supply chain security, the fracking revolution here in the United States, and then most recently the future of the Panama Canal. So lots of interesting topics. Also, I've done a book on Black Sea security, looking at Ukraine, Romania, Moldova, and its relationship to Russia. That's in addition to editing the Journal of Transportation Security, which I founded back 16 years ago. Kind
Wow.
of looking at this now from an academic perspective, not so much as a business person, but still thinking like a business person, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting, certainly for my students, if not anybody else.
Is writing a book one of the hardest things you've ever done?
No, I've done 25, and for me, it's not as difficult as other things might in my life. It's very cathartic for me, and it's something I really enjoy. In fact, I'm working on number 26 as we speak. So it's just it's the way I learn. I love to read and I love to write. Again, it's kind of therapy for me when I write. So it's something I really enjoy. The key is finding the quiet space and the quiet time to be able to do that in life. But now that our kids are raised and my wife is moving into retirement, and I'm really just still teaching at the university, I can find more time to do that now, and I'm looking forward to that going forward.
Very cool. Dad, why don't you start? What questions do you have for Andrew? Were we going to start with the tariffs? Is that what you were thinking,
Well,
or where do you want to start?
since Andrew is an expert on Panama and the Panama Canal, I'd like to ask him, did President Trump's immediate interest in the Panama Canal and in essentially taking over the Panama Canal surprise you? And what is the strategic implication of the Panama Canal today?
It's a great question, Lloyd. Thanks. A couple things that kind of didn't really surprise me because I followed President Trump since he came down the golden escalator, as he calls it, back in 2015. And almost every one of his rallies, he would mention regarding American greatness that we had dug out the Panama Canal. And I get that from Trump the builder, Trump the developer. I mean, it's one of the most impressive things that humanity's ever done is finally connect that path between the seas. That was done in Panama. It was a 500-year dream that only the United States government, I think, could have ever accomplished, and we did. And there were tens of thousands of people who died. Probably, we don't know the final numbers. It was a heroic effort. It was an expensive effort. It took many, many iterations to make it finally happen. So I think from that perspective, and again, wasn't surprised when Trump would be talking about the canal. I was a little blown away when he said during his inauguration speech, "We're going to get it back." And I think that kind of speaks to the importance of the canal today. And this is something I think that a lot of people don't think about the canal. For almost from the period we finished the canal, which was in the late 19 teens, the first ship transmitted in 1914, almost for the next 25 years, the canal was of somewhat importance to the United States. By the time we get to World War II, the original purpose the canal was built, and that was for a military purpose, not an economic one, for a military purpose. Teddy Roosevelt convinced the American Congress to pay for the canal at the early part of the 20th century by saying, we will, by building the canal, only need a one ocean navy. We will not need to have a navy in the Pacific and a navy in the Atlantic. We will just need one navy because they can transmit the canal, those ships. By the time we get to World War II, we find that the canal becomes less and less important to the United States. Again, commercially, it did play a role in helping us move cargo from the East Coast to the West Coast. We're still developing our road network. Overwhelming, though, it was still a military effort. And then we get to World War II and we start building bigger ships. And the bigger ships that were being used in World War II eventually came to a point where they couldn't transmit the canal. The locks were simply too small. So within about 25 years, the canal was really not worth what we had thought it to be. The original purpose that we had built it for was really waning. The United States Navy famously said it was now becoming an ancillary to the United States Navy, the canal that is. And Harry Truman in 1947 famously said, why don't we get out of Panama gracefully before we get kicked out? Because the other thing that was happening, I guess there were two things. One was we were building our interstate highway system after World War II, which made moving cargo from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States a lot easier and cheaper. We expanded our our rail network, our intermodal systems of train and rail, and then aviation all became more connected. And then the last thing that a lot of Americans I don't think about, but was a result of World War II also, was the development of the West Coast of the United States into a fully functional, independent economy. Prior to World War II, there was dependency from the West Coast on the East and the Midwest. That wasn't the case after the war. We had relocated huge amounts of manufacturing to the West Coast, including significant portions of aviation. Energy was being produced in the West Coast. Capital markets were fully developed. So you had, for the first time in human history in the United States, a continental power with independent economies operating, of course, connected as well through the country, but operating on both of the coasts. So the canal commercially wasn't nearly as important. Militarily, because the ships were too big to go through, it wasn't as vital as it was. And then there was something else, and that was the canal zone as it operated. We had liberated, and I put that in quotes, Panama from Colombia in 1903 to build the canal, to do the work, created this nation. It was interesting, the Constitution of Panama was written by an American and a Frenchman at the Waldorf Astoria. There were no Panamanians present when their own Constitution was written. And then what happened is we placed in Panama this, what was, many people thought, especially Panamanians, the 51st American state, which was this 50 square mile area where the canal was, that was the United States transplanted into the Central American rainforest. Panamanians couldn't enter. My wife's Panamanian, of course, all of her family are. They could see the canal zone because it was right on the other side of the fence. They couldn't enter. It was pristine. It was a worker's paradise. It was all run by Americans. And of course, as the Cold War evolved, and we're railing against Soviet-style imperialism and the Soviets trying to establish their empire around the world, everybody could point and say, well, look at you Americans. You have this canal zone operating as a quasi-country inside another country. And the Panamanians, of course, are becoming, and they have been always, becoming even more nationalistic. They were embarrassed by it. So again, you had Harry Truman in 1947 saying, why don't we get out gracefully before we get kicked out? Because the importance of the canal wasn't as strong. There was the rising tide of nationalism in Panama. Dwight Eisenhower, the president after him, even said um, about the Panama Canal, ideas that were good once oftentimes become not so good ideas. Again, maybe we should leave. You saw Lyndon Johnson. You saw even Richard Nixon thinking about risking political capital to get rid of the canal. Its importance was waning. The United States economy was becoming much more robust with regards to our intermodal networks of transportation here. There was some value in the canal, but it was getting less and less, and of course, it was costing us billions and billions of dollars a year to operate it. So eventually, it was Jimmy Carter who took the risk of the political capital investment and was able to get enough support in the United States Senate to give the canal back to the Panamanians. And by the time we get to this end of this transition period from the 70s until 2000, when it officially was handed over, the American people and American business in many ways, certainly the American military, are pretty much tired of the canal. We were done with it.
It had been improved also, right?
Well, it hadn't been improved yet. There were discussions about improving it. We never did it. Again, we lost billions of dollars. And so by the time we gave it away at the ceremony on New Year's Day in 2000, we didn't even send a representative. Our own government didn't even send a representative to the official handover ceremony. It was Jimmy Carter who represented our government, the retired president, to the Panamanians and said, okay, here's the keys, go with it. And the belief, of course, was we're giving this massive piece of infrastructure, probably worth $1 trillion or so, all of this land, all of these buildings, the canal itself, to a country of about 3.5 million people. And yes, there had been this transition period for about 20 years, moving Americans out and Panamanians into the jobs. But there was lots of concern and even just absolute lack of confidence. There was a famous New Yorker cartoon that showed Uncle Sam giving the keys to a Ferrari to a 16-year-old Panamanian with the canal representing it, saying, okay, now go at it. And one of the most remarkable, and this is what I really found exciting about when I did my book, one of the most remarkable business stories of the last 25 years has been what the Panamanians have done with the canal. It's a great case study. I wish we taught it more in business schools. It's a great case study about manufacturing. I'm not sorry, not manufacturing, but management efficiency, quality assurance, customer relationships. The Panamanians did all that. Now, the Americans helped them. We got them to the transition point, but the canal now is making billions of dollars every year in net profits for its customer, which is the Panamanian
people. And it wasn't making money before.
It hemorrhaged money. We don't really know because the bookkeeping was so lousy, but the Panamanians made in the first couple of years more than we think. Again, it's estimates that the Americans had ever made. And of course, we built it too. The return on our investment was really never there, and the Panamanians have operated incredibly well.
What's the difference between it? I think you were going to get to that, but
yeah,
what's the difference between the new one and the improved one?
It really comes down, again, the Panamanians, first thing, and everybody listening to this will appreciate it, the Americans never had ISO on the canal. First thing the Panamanians did, they said, we need to establish credibility. We're not going to wreck the Ferrari. We're not going to be those poor brown people, if you will, who are going to run this thing into the ground. So they got ISO 9001 standards within a year. Pretty remarkable. Anybody who's tried to do that. And it showed the canal as being at a level playing field for all of its global partners, shippers, and all of the suppliers involved in that business. And then they were able to get the fare system under control. That they put in a computerized booking system so that people could schedule in advance when they'd go through the canal. They got the fares right. They built better customer relationships, and they embarked in 2006 on this expansion to build another set of locks to handle bigger vessels. And this is, I think, an interesting case study in luck. Because the Panamanians, again, a country of 3.5–4 million people, which always has punched above its weight class, and is today the equivalent of Slovenia in terms of quality of life and GDP per capita, which is an EU member, NATO member. Panama decided to come up with $5 billion to put in a new set of locks, to build bigger locks so that the bigger vessels, and they were thinking back 20 years ago or so, that those bigger vessels would be these container ships, these massive container ships that would be coming from Asia, primarily to the East Coast of the United States, bringing in cheaper consumer goods from China. That seemed to be the trade of the future, and they wanted to be able to handle those bigger vessels by making this major investment in these bigger set of locks. And of course, one of the things that was happening at that time, and the Panamanians were doing what we told them to do, and that is focus on your core competency. Those things that you don't do really well, let other people do it. So even before the transition in 2000, China, in this case, it was a Hong Kong company, Hutchinson was given the contract by the Panamanians with the American blessing to operate the ports on the Atlantic and Pacific side. In 2007, when the final contracts were given for the $5 billion expansion program, the contracts were given to Italians and Spaniards to do the work. So here you have the Panamanians kind of doing what companies do all the time, outsourcing those things that we don't do really well to international partners, whether it was Hong Kong, whether it was Spain, whether it was Italy. And they built the locks, and the locks started really operating at about, pretty good efficiency in 2014, 2015. Came in around budget, a little bit longer it took, but still it was a very impressive effort on the part of the contractors. And then they woke up one day and they realized that container traffic, those massive container ships, and more of them with more and more boxes coming in, that traffic wasn't drying up, of course, but it hadn't gone anywhere. It was just very flat. And they woke up and they said, whoa, maybe this isn't really going to be the future of the canal. And then the thing that nobody predicted was already beginning to happen in the United States, was already beginning to bubble up to the surface. And that, of course, was our shale energy revolution, which effectively started in 2006 or 2007, really took off in the 2010s and beyond, to a point where by the time we got to 2014, 2015, the United States, which was believing we were going to be an importer of energy, particularly natural gas, all of a sudden, again, seemingly overnight, it took about 10 years, we woke up and we're like one of the biggest exporters of natural gas. And of course, and again, this is about luck, and I guess luck is when preparation meets opportunity. The opportunity now for exporting liquid natural gas from the United States to the big importing markets, which would be China, India, Japan, and Korea, those exports could now go from the eastern coast of the United States through the Panama Canal, because now the canal could handle these massive LNG ships that they couldn't have handled before. So the future of the canal really is more important today, I think, than any time in its history, because you're talking about exporting American energy, and those exports are going to those nations that really, really need carbon energy to be able to fuel their economic growth, including China, India, Japan, and Korea. Without American liquid natural gas, in many ways, those economies don't flourish. And of course, energy exports in this country, we'd be looking for other markets, and there are out there, but they give us a huge customer base of which to provide real value to the American side of the equation as well.
So that's why the guy in power is interested in the Panama Canal.
Well, I think to your point, I think there's a couple of things. Again, I think he's a builder and developer. He loves the canal. He thinks it's really cool that we build it. I think that's a personal thing. I think also it's more important today than probably it's been in its history. Also, what's happened is, in addition to what I described earlier as the original Hutchinson contract from Hong Kong, China has gotten closer to Panama. Not just in terms of the canal, just as a nation, one to another. So in 2017, for example, China became very active in trying to get Latin American countries to sign off on this Belt Road Initiative, their multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure project. Panama became the first country in Latin America to sign up. Then the Panamanians completely recognized the People's Republic of China and forwent their previous recognition of Taiwan, because you can't recognize both for whatever reason. China went to Panama and said, hey, can you recognize us? And the Panamanians did. And then, of course, in 2021, 2022, there was the contract for that 25-year management of the port, or the ports, I guess, on either side of the canal. That came up again, and Hutchinson, a Hong Kong company, which of course now is fully China, they got it again. So you have that history, as well as another series of infrastructure projects that are happening or will happen or potentially might, regarding China and Panama around the canal, including Margarita Island, which is a transshipment island for unloading some of those massive container vessels, potentially another bridge over the canal, potentially a new reservoir being dug, maybe with Chinese contractors. And so Trump, I think, looked at all of this and said, no, too much. And so it's kind of a package of things. And also there's something else going on in U.S. Panamanian relationships, and that's illegal immigration. And that's one of the things
Mm.
that Trump has been heavy on. About 1.5 million people who eventually came into our country came up through Colombia, through the Darien Gap, crossed into Panama, and then moved north all the way across Mexico into the United States. That's not the biggest percentage of people who came into the country in the last 4 years illegally, yet 1.5 million and about 400,000 Chinese, we believe, came up that way. And the Panamanians have been saying, we want to close that border, but you got gangs, you got cartels, very powerful gangs, very powerful cartels. And Trump's saying, you got to close the border. They say, we want to close the border, but we can't because we don't have the resources. Panama, although it's relatively wealthy, it doesn't have unlimited resources. So there's lots of interest in what's going on in Panama relative to what the president's campaign promises and now what it appears to be his policies are.
Interesting. So,
Why haven't we been aware of all of these things until now?
It's a good question. I think we were kind of asleep at the wheel for a while. I think part of it is that American companies really never got involved in even trying to bid on these contracts. The belief was that China, as we've seen around the world, you guys probably would see it in your business, they subsidize their manufacturers heavy. And they do the same thing with contracts, particularly contracts that are important around infrastructure assets like the Panama Canal. So I just think Americans just kind of lost track of the ball. And again, I think the shale energy revolution, the exports, got the canal back on the radar for a lot of American companies, yet I think it was not really on the radar of our government per se. And I think outside of the energy industry, I think a lot of people just simply weren't paying attention. And then you wake up one day and maybe it takes somebody as loud and whatever else words you want to use, like Donald Trump, to start pointing a finger and saying, hey, look what's going on here. We've been kind of asleep at the switch for a while. Interesting development just yesterday. Breaking news, if you want to use it such, probably not. Still, it's interesting. Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, was down in Panama, and he met with the president of Panama. And of course, Panamanians are fiercely nationalistic. They are not going to give the canal back. They believe that they've made all the requisite demands fulfilled. He did compromise on one thing, at least publicly, and that is that they're going to revisit possibly that Belt Road Initiative agreement, the memorandum of understanding, that they might revisit that with regards to their relationship with China. And they also have announced, and they announced this several weeks ago before President Trump even took the oath of office, that they were going to revisit and audit that renewed contract with Hutchinson from 2023. Because there were some irregularities. A lot of people did say that in Panama and out that there were some irregularities with the renewal of that contract. So maybe that's a little bit of placating to President Trump, saying, hey, we are listening to what you're saying. Don't be talking about taking the canal back militarily or anything like that. Yet, maybe give an opportunity to American companies, if that audit turns out to be enough to reopen the bidding, maybe to have some American companies get involved, and then Trump can claim victory by saying, we got the canal back. And it would be an American company doing the management of the ports rather than the Chinese.
Are the Chinese doing a good job as far as running the canal?
Well, they're not running it per se. Trump wants them to say that Panamanians run the canal. China and the contracts that are given they're outsourced providers. They're service providers, and it's ultimately the accountability of the Panamanians to the Panamanian people that runs the canal on a day-to-day basis. Only Panamanian citizens can work for the Canal Authority. The contractors, they got to hire Panamanians. It's again using expertise from other nations. In this case, it happens to be China. Is what the Panamanians have done really well, and that's what they're claiming. Look at the success of the canal. We're returning $3 billion net each year to the Panamanian Treasury. We're fulfilling our obligations. The canal is full. Our clients, the customer base of shippers, they're all very pleased with what we're doing, so on that sense, they're managing the Chinese vendors very well to keep the overall operations of the canal at a first world level.
So it takes us back to the shale revolution in the United States and in the world. Could there be a shale revolution without the Panama Canal?
Well, it happened first here without the canal because it was really focused on domestic energy production. And the technology that evolved in that period, as well as the unique American circumstances that allowed for the shale energy revolution to unfold. I mean, having private property rights for the energy that's contained in the mineral rights. That's a uniquely American thing. Everywhere else around the world, nations own the mineral rights. So national governments got to approve of anything that would happen under the surface of the earth. Not the United States. Mineral rights are held by private individuals, and that enables entrepreneurs to come in and use their innovative tools and raise capital and do what we've seen happen. The geopolitical aspect, though, to your point, Lloyd, it's a good one. Because of the canal, because of the Americans' ability to export energy now, that's really the big game changer we're seeing with regards to the relationship of the United States to the rest of the world. That's why we can see President Trump make these grandiose statements and even implement things like tariffs with Mexico and Canada. And I saw stopping aid to South Africa. You can start doing these things because the United States, although we're integrated into the global economy, we're not nearly as integrated as much of the rest of the big countries of the world. About 10 or 12% of our economy is really international trade. The rest of it's domestic. And the fact that we have this now seemingly unlimited energy source, particularly with natural gas and oil flowing, that gives us enough ability to export it, says we don't need to be so dependent upon the rest of the world like we were even 20 years ago. I mean, Obama and W. Bush before him, they were both just freaked out in their State of Union addresses about how do we get foreign sources of energy because we were running out of the critical carbon energy that we needed, and now that's been so transformative, not just for our economy but for the rest of the world, that American foreign policy can go through these seemingly massive alterations. What we're seeing right now.
Why can't anybody get anybody else other than the United States get shale?
Well,
Shale
Argentina.
oil.
Yeah, Argentina's doing it, and the UK has started doing it. You need national will, is what you need. You need to have the national government. They control the mineral rights, and that's a political decision as much as it is anything else. And so I think what will happen now that we've kind of burned through the green energy revolution, and it's becoming abundantly clear that we're going to need more and more carbon energy to sustain a growing, prosperous world economy. I think you're going to see a lot of nations that were reluctant previous because they thought, well, we could go green rather than frack, even though they may possess shale and what's inside that shale rock. I think you're going to begin to see more nations begin to really make hard consideration and say, this is something maybe we want to do, kind of replicating what the United States did. Again, though, these are national political decisions that are not made easily compared to, I mean, I'm in Ohio. We have neighboring Pennsylvania as well. I mean, those really are individuals as well as state decisions in terms of can we frack or not. Getting a national government to agree, particularly in Europe or even in Asia, that's a lot harder to do. I think, though, we're going to see that trend line, though, move in the direction where more and more nations are going to try to replicate what we've done here.
Tariffs.
Okay. Thank you
Tariffs.
very much. It brings us to tariffs.
Tariffs.
Right.
Oh no, here we go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's just go right to, I mean, when this podcast comes out in 2 weeks, we won't exactly know what's happened, but right now, I mean, I saw the market tumbled. It's February 3rd, Monday, and they say he's going to do tariffs on Canada and Mexico and 25%.
Yeah.
What?
China.
Well, and of course China.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, are the tariffs on oil from Canada, or is it just that Canada could then tighten the screws on their oil?
That way. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's early days. I think, we could talk through the weeds here, and I don't know where we'll be in 2 weeks when this finally plays. I'd be reluctant to say what the specifics, might look like. I think the macro picture might be more interesting and more compelling and maybe more of a guidepost going forward. And I think what we're seeing really, and this has been happening over the last 35 years, is the United States having an inflection point. And we hear that term used all the time. I think we're finally there. When the Cold War ended and communism was swept out of the Soviet Union and all of its client states, and then China as well joined the global economy, India came in, the United States was triumphant. in the early 90s. I mean, our principles, the global capitalist system that we had sought to build coming out of World War II and to bringing in as many nations as possible, it happened. It was the world we wanted. We wanted this world. We wanted everybody to be a capitalist. Maybe they weren't Democrats with a small d, but they certainly were capitalists, except maybe for North Korea and Cuba and Venezuela, for example. But everybody else was a capitalist, and they were going to be operating in this American-led, American rule-based system. That required, though, a continuation of American empire, the American empire that really was launched at Bretton Woods in 1944, prior to the end of World War II, which meant a massive American commitment to that capitalist system and incredible resources, incredible blood, treasure, whether it was Korea, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was the first Gulf War. It was really a commitment to maintaining this American-led system and all the promises that we had made. And what began to emerge very quietly was a questioning. And we don't really think about it this way, but really a lot of what's gone on in American politics the last 35 years, and I think to this point we're really asking that question in a much louder way, is America, are we going to be more focused on our republic here at home, or are we going to maintain this empire that we had built? And overwhelmingly during the 1990s, the answer was we're going to maintain the empire. In fact, we're going to try to expand the empire to the best of our ability. And you had a foreign policy elite, whether it was at universities, at think tanks, certainly in Washington and Congress, and it was all presidents from Clinton to early W. Bush that pretty much said we're going to do this. And then as we get later into this century, like the last 20 years particularly, there was beginning to have pushback to that maybe this really global integration, and a lot of it was economic because we saw what happened when we opened up with NAFTA, our manufacturing base, then we went to China later on. A lot of people started saying, wait a minute, time out here, what are we doing? We're living by the principles that we want everybody else to live by an open and free world. We're paying for it, we're securing everybody, we're making sure there's enough carbon energy for everybody. What does that mean for us here at home? And I think you got to 2016, and people were tired of what we had done in Iraq and what had happened in Afghanistan and all of these other military ventures that seemed to be utter failures. And you saw at 16, and I think people forget this, and it was only, 9 years ago. The two most powerful, or at least popular politicians at that time were Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, right and left, Republican, Democrat, and they were really effectively saying the same thing about American empire. Enough's enough. Let's focus here at home. Let's focus on healthcare. Let's focus on manufacturing, jobs. Let's America first type thing. And then, of course, Trump wins. His first presidency is launched with just chaos, and that wasn't the focus. Yet there was still this notion burgeoning within broad spectrums of the American population on both sides of the political aisle that maybe American empire isn't the way forward for the country. And here we are in 2025 now, and you have an administration. I thought it was very interesting, Marco Rubio's comments in Spanish yesterday to the press when he was with the president of Panama. He said that we now live in a multipolar world. For an American Secretary of State to say that is a revolutionary comment.
What does that mean, a multipolar
world?
Well,
it means now we recognize that the United States, although maybe the most powerful nation in the world, isn't the exceptional power. We are not the policemen of the world. We are going to be living next to the Chinese and the Russians and everybody else in a way that's very, very different than that exceptional American empire of Dick Cheney, of the neocons, if you will, the party, the uniparty in Washington that really wants us to continue to be involved in every aspect of the world and project global hegemony around it. That was a very, very stark comment to me. And I think what we will see, and Trump's tariffs, to go back to the original question, what do the tariffs mean? This is the president saying, we can slap tariffs anytime we want because this isn't about maintaining the system anymore, that global capitalist system. This is now about truly America first and what's in the interest of the American people. That has not always been at the forefront of thinking in Washington. It's been what is in the interest of the system, the American capitalist system that operates around the world. And the way we're approaching this is very, very different. And the fact that you won a pretty good mandate and there's members of Congress, many members of Congress who are still reluctant to this, even Republicans. But yet there's Democrats and Republicans that are saying, "Now, wait a minute, maybe we should look at this differently." Tells us that we're at this inflection point. That the question now becomes, to what extent empire versus to what extent republic, and can you have one and the other at the same time, or does one have to be sacrificed? And I think that's kind of the big question we're going to see here going forward.
Yeah. My issue is I feel like we come across as a bully. Um,
Well, we come across as a different kind of America. We come across as an America that was very much thinking about the system and all of the implications for that capitalist system the last 70 or 80 years. And now we're thinking about it just what's good for America at the expense of others who might have, gotten a lot of favor, or might have gotten a lot of benefit by being part of the system. Now it's just truly this America First approach. And that is something I think that there's a significant amount of the population that agrees with, much more than it has been over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So again, following the trend line tells us that this is going to become even a more important debate going forward in our country rather than a less important one. And it has implications because, okay, we're going to slap tariffs on people who aren't doing what we want them to do. That's not what we had done in the past. And it appears that this might become something that's much more a norm than an exception. And then what does that mean for business? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean for consumers and all those other implications that follow?
and I just don't know the nuances of what they're tariffing from what country, but to me, it sounds strange that Mexico, Canada tariff 25% and China 10%. Are these different things that they're putting tariffs on?
Again, he just announced it. So I don't know what they're specifically going to go after. I think the reason he's doing it, though, and again, I like Maya Angelou, the famous poet. She says when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Trump has said overwhelmingly. He says, that fentanyl is killing, tens and tens of thousands of Americans a year. We don't make fentanyl in this country. It's made. The original products, base for it, are made in China. They're shipped to Mexico. Fentanyl comes across the U.S.-Mexican border, also comes across the U.S.-Canadian border, as well as the illegals and all of the things that means. So I think Trump is saying, well, I'm going to use tariffs to get you people to stop doing things that are harming the American people. That's what I was elected to do, which includes, sealing your borders and keeping that stuff out of here. Now, does that mean it works? That's another discussion way beyond my pay grade. I think, though, and that's what he's been saying, we don't want fentanyl pouring into our country and killing hundreds of thousands of our people as it has. And he believes, irrespective of the American role in fentanyl, certainly that, the production and transport of it coming in from Canada and the United States is worthy of these tariffs.
Interesting. So that's the reason you see it more rather than just I don't know.
Well, no, I'm saying
what
what Trump is saying is that he wants the border sealed, and that includes people as well as fentanyl. Now there's also, I'm sure there's an economic element to this as well, in terms of trying to protect particular American industries, and at the same time there's a political statement saying, hey, at any moment I can use these against you, and you guys could suffer more than we can. As what's happening today, for example, on February 3rd with the markets, I can't imagine the president's going to allow the stock market, because of the actions he's doing, to continue to free fall over the next several weeks. I'd be shocked by that because he's promised he's going to keep America strong economically. I think, though, this is a message, though, that he'll say, hey, I mean, we need certain things out of you. And if we don't get them, the tariffs become the weapon of choice.
No, look.
And that's bullying, to your point, and it's something the world has not seen before from the United States, which again is a reflection, Noah, to your point, I think, of this debate we're having about how much should we engage with the rest of the world versus how much should we focus here at home? Empire versus republic.
I mean,
I think there is not a real political debate at the moment going on about tariffs because people are baffled by what Trump is doing and why he's doing it now. If we see prices going up in the United States dramatically over the next month, there will be a hue and cry about the tariffs.
No, I think you're right. And if the market continues a free fall, I think even more so. And they could say, well, he was elected to stop inflation and help the economy and bring down the price of things. And here we are. The first things he's doing are really antithetical to that. So I think again, he's looking at this as a weapon to try to extract something from whomever he's doing this to, and but I'd say it's a big calculated risk, and we'll see how smart he really is when all this plays out.
Like I don't I mean I don't like him. But what I will say is that like you know he's being unpredictable and he's being this guy who people are going to look at and they're going to go, he may just be crazy enough to do it. I
Well, and
better
that's yeah,
I I
that's what Richard Nixon did with his madman theory when he was elected. He was trying to get the world to believe that he would do anything possible. Or anything even impossible. So there are people would like, we're not going to mess with this guy at all. We're going to leave him alone. He's
yeah,
crazy.
I mean it may work.
It may work. Yeah.
I hate, you know, maybe that has to do with my personality. I'm sort of a non-confrontational person. Um, so it makes me nervous, this idea of, and maybe that's an issue I have. I'm too busy trying to be too concerned with trying to be liked.
Yeah.
He's not worried about trying to be liked, which is, I think that's pretty essential if you're going to be a successful leader.
Well, and remember, he's not worrying about running for re-election either. So, his time is limited.
Now,
His
he
time
may
is
be,
short.
but you never know.
Yeah. I think though that he's looking at this. He's got 2 years maybe to really make things happen and shake things up. And he's not going to sit around and wait. And so if he thinks he can use tariffs as a weapon to extract value from what he's hoping to accomplish, I think and he said that. I mean, again, if anybody listened to him on the campaign trail, he was talking about the Panama Canal in every speech. He was saying the most beautiful word he knows is tariffs. I mean, no, this should be no surprise to anybody what he's doing. I think I think we've become so maybe immune to politicians lying to us and not telling us what they're going to do. But this guy's doing exactly that. So
Right. So that's why he's so scary.
yeah.
So, but with China, it's only 10%. Is that the case? Or
As it
we
is
don't.
now, as it sits today, yeah, February 3rd.
So that's more for economic reasons as opposed to I want them to seal their borders reasons. So
Well, I don't know.
it's a different kind of power play.
It's a power play. Again, though, he's talked about fentanyl all the time too, and the ravages of it. Anybody who's been touched by it, family, friends, communities, I certainly have been.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And the precursors are made in China. They're shipped to Mexico. They make it there. The cartels do. I mean, he's going to war with the cartels too. Don't forget it. He signed an executive order calling them terrorist organizations, which brings the full weight of the United States government against the drug cartels in Mexico because they make this stuff and they transport it. So, again, and he said he would do that. Yeah, he said that from day one. And so this is probably part of a broader scheme. Again, him seeking in the early days when he has maximum momentum and maximum power, probably
Yeah.
to do these things that might seem very uncomfortable to people, with the expectation that as a month or two from now, people won't even be talking about it. We will have moved on to something else.
Can you imagine Trump sending troops into Mexico in an attempt to quiet the cartels?
I think he'll threaten it. I can't imagine him doing it. I think maybe near the border, though, if they're operating there, even the sovereign territory of Mexico would be hard to violate. Yet at the border, you could claim there was a clash happening
Unless you
there.
were invited.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think the government of Mexico is going to invite us. So again, I think it's a threat. The madman theory may be at work here. We've seen that before, and I think though he's serious because he got a pretty significant mandate. I mean, if you take out 3 or 4 states, it was an overwhelming vote for the Republican Party, and I think a lot of it has to do with what's been touching those people who voted for him, and fentanyl and illegal immigration are things that certainly are a lot closer to those folks than maybe others.
We have Chinese companies, European companies, American companies in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
making parts, and then they're tariffing Mexico. Um, I don't know. It's very confusing as far as how that. Okay, so if an American has a company in Mexico has a factory in Mexico making parts, they're going to get tariffed on those parts coming up. I guess that's the way it works.
As it sits right now, that appears to be the case.
Yeah.
Everything coming out of Mexico is going to get hit, even if it's American made or has American components in it or something. Again, it would seem to me that again, I'm not going to try to get in the guy's head. It would seem to me this would be a temporary announcement. We're going to do it. We'll put the tariffs on. There'll probably be some rippling through the economy, and then hopefully in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever that is, whatever he wants extracted from Mexico will have happened. And then he can say, look, we took the tariffs away because they behaved properly.
Okay, so we can do it that quickly, I guess.
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
you can start them this quickly and you can turn them off that quickly. That's executive authority. Yeah, president can do that.
Interesting.
So I think from a business perspective, again, I haven't been in business for a long time. I can't remember a time though in my life that public policy at a government level has been this confusing with regards to doing just day-to-day business. I can't remember a time like that where you have the U.S. government being so unpredictable. That's one of the benefits of doing business in the United States is our government is pretty predictable. Even when there's policy shifts, it takes a long time for things to happen. But this stuff is happening so quickly. I think it's just got people blown away that, man, this is not the way we thought business, the environment is in this country. And in fact, it's throwing everybody for a loop.
Why 25% tariffs on Canada?
Well, again, I think he wants them to seal the border. There have been a lot of illegals have come down from Canada. Some fentanyl's come across from Canada. There might be some other reasons behind the scenes. I don't know. Again, these are early days in this, but he's clearly said we're gonna shut the fentanyl flow into this country and we're gonna close our borders and stop illegals from coming in. I mean, he said that, and that means the two borders that we have now. What are they doing with regards to the airports? That's a whole nother. A lot of people fly into this country too and just happen to stay. I haven't seen a whole lot of what's happening on that side of the equation where you're giving people visas to come into this country. They land at an airport like in Chicago and they just never leave. I don't know what's happening on that front too. So I'm sure they're going to do something. So that seems to me, at least in early days, that's the reason for the slap on Canada as well.
Why Greenland?
Well, I think first of all, you look at naval power going forward. Russia's Navy is able to navigate up there. The Chinese Navy is able to navigate there if they want with impunity. We can, of course, as well. So it becomes a naval shipping lane issue. And also, I think one of the things going forward, and we've seen this in Ukraine, one reason nobody wants to, leave Ukraine is because of the natural resources, rare earth minerals, particularly. A lot of them in Greenland, a lot of them in Ukraine, a lot of places where there's conflict or potential conflict. Because going forward is we need more and more of these minerals to operate AI servers and high-tech supercomputers. We're going to need more of that stuff in Greenland because of its geographic location around those shipping lanes, as well as because of the minerals there. Becomes very attractive.
Do you have anything else, as we wind this down, um, how are you feeling about, I mean, these specialties you have as far as energy and uh, are you, I know there's just so many complicated things going on
Mhm.
in our lives, but how does it, are you feeling more stressed about uh, things going on geopolitically right now than you were, say, a year ago?
No, I think the one issue that needs to be resolved, the tariffs aside, the Panama Canal aside, even the relationship with China, these are evolving things that will go through the course, and they'll have impact. It won't be significant, massive impact. The one thing that still is at the top of the list is the Ukraine war. This has to be resolved. Russia is not going to sit around forever and wait. They can't. Russia views this as a existential threat. the presence of Ukraine as it is, and potentially as a member of NATO. President Trump has to deal with that. I'm hoping that, that all that he's been doing will take us in a very short time to Russia and to sit down and legitimately negotiate an end to that war. Because without that, we are playing with fire. The world is. And that's my concern. I think things in the Middle East can be resolved. Through a lot of
You think it's really time to like just to end this thing in Ukraine, do whatever necessary?
It has to. Russia sees this existentially. Russia has been invaded 3 times through Ukraine in the last 150 years to probably the death of 100 million of its citizens. They know that. We built up a 600,000 man army over multiple decades, placed them on the Russian border next to and in the middle of Russian citizens, or at least Russian nationals. And Russia wanted negotiations. They wanted negotiations even after they invaded in February of 22. They can't accept, and they will not accept any discussion about anything except Ukrainian neutrality. And that has to be on the table. And until that occurs, this is going to fester. And the fact that missiles are being fired, Russia's talking about leaving nuclear agreements, developing all kinds of other new technologies. We're talking about the same kinds of things with iron domes that Trump has discussed. This puts the world at very, very high risk for something going wrong. And just because we think we can predict what the other guy is going to do doesn't mean we can. And oftentimes we're very wrong. And you're messing with fire here. And this has to be resolved. And I hope the president sees that as top priority #1 internationally. I realize the border and fentanyl and these things are critical. He can also have attention, though. I wish Marco Rubio was going to Ukraine rather than to Panama right now. I really do. Because we've got to get this thing resolved.